Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, we'll get into the most recent bowl game tea leaves. Could I interest you in the city of syrup in late December? Also, recapping a roller coaster ride from Mark Adams and the Red Raiders as they down the Hoyas of Georgetown, but not without difficulty. We get into it next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Glad to have you along for the ride on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen with the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan, and coming at you on the heels of a win for Mark Adams and his Red Raiders from United Supermarkets Arena, 79-65. So maybe a margin if you're just waking it up and you're hearing those numbers, you're thinking, all right, so mostly according to script, which means you have no idea of the roller coaster ride we went on. Taking in this one, Chris, and you were there courtside for it. Most importantly, you get a win, but man, was not without some adventure on both ends, right?
Yeah, last night it was in certain points of the game. There's like this point, I guess, in the middle part of the second half. It's just a microcosm of who this team is, because you're up 23 points, and you're like, okay, man, it's a party. We're swag surfing. We're doing all the stuff. It's like may even leave early, go get in the car, get out of here early. It's another boring win, and then next thing you know, you can't score at all, and Georgetown is just pouring them in from everywhere. They went from down 23 to down 1, okay, in the span of about 6 minutes. And that's when you saw, okay, young team, inexperienced team, making some mistakes and kind of panicking and all that. Whereas there was points late in the first half when you went on a 16-0 run yourself, where exciting team that's starting to figure it out. Guys being more aggressive, trying to score it, rebounding really well and all that. So it's just that's what this group is going to be right now. But I'll tell you, it was interesting how few of players saw, minutes in this one, as far as because the rotation shrank, and this is kind of, this is what you're going to start to see happen a little bit. And bench scoring was largely non-existent. And Armen Williams, he gives you 6 off the bench, and that's basically it. I mean, you had somebody else add in 1 point, but that was pretty much it. And so, you realize kind of how maybe thin you are when it gets real. And but it was a fun game. I'll be honest with you, I was kind of in awe of just looking at Patrick Ewing, man. I don't mind telling you, I was like, the dude's an icon, right?
Yeah, he is.
Gold medals, Knicks, Hoyas, all the above.
Pacers, Heat.
Yes.
Jeff Van Gundy on the floor.
Yes.
So many of our memories, right? Our basketball memories.
And the funny thing is, Stan Van Gundy was sitting behind his bench tonight in a blue hoodie.
Right?
Yes. I don't know what his purpose was, or if he traveled with the team. I don't know. But, yeah, Stan Van Gundy was hanging out with the Hoyas and the staff before the game. But, yeah, it was fun. Because, I mean, when you think about it, I never thought that Georgetown would ever play a basketball game in Lubbock, Texas. And when you think about that, because the Georgetown that we knew, it's like, what are we doing that for? Why are we going to Lubbock? But there, you have this challenge with this conference, and it was pretty cool. And they don't look like the worst team in the Big East Conference, that's for sure. I mean, goodness gracious, I'd like to have some of that size and athleticism, but you outlasted them last night.
Yeah, it was really interesting to just sit there and feel the presence of a guy like that in your building. It wasn't lost on me either, Chris. And I was thinking about some of those sitting courtside up close and personal. Just look out for flying basketballs to the face, because you may be just staring at Patrick Ewing. But no, I want to credit Georgetown and some of what they did. Obviously, I do feel like Texas Tech, I don't know if they physically, literally let off of the gas, but it did seem like body language, some of the approach, or maybe intensity more so on the offensive and defensive end. I thought I noticed a shift. And clearly when you get to a point where it's 18-0 run, I think, and a plus 5 minute scoring drought for Texas Tech, that's incredible. Obviously it begins to be noticeable, but something that you want to trim up, and maybe that's something that's a byproduct of some youth and maybe just relative inexperience as far as being a team and playing through some of those things, finishing games. But I also tell myself, as I say that out loud, we're getting into the month of December, and you're not young across the board. You got some gray hairs, figuratively, that are out there for you. Guys like Harmon, guys like O'Banner that you would hope could be there for your team when you're trying to close out a win like that. But nonetheless, you do wind up a winner this night. We will get to some more of those individuals, including one we touched on yesterday, Jaylon Tyson, who seemed like he heard the message from Mark Adams with a big night, not only offensively, but beyond the arc. Want to get to him coming up in just a moment, Chris. But unfortunately, one thing we saw rear its ugly head, something I mentioned yesterday that I took some solace in leaving Maui. In your 2 games against the best opponents, your turnover number was manageable. I think if you're in a 12 or 13 or less range, you can be a pretty good team on the year. Well, that wasn't the case again tonight. You were getting busy in both halves in the turnover column.
Yeah, there was, because I was doing radio last night, and Mark Adams, he stands right in front of me at different points of the game, and there's just some of these moments where you feel his pain, and he's trying to be calmer, he's trying to be patient. I think he's gotten on to these kids. He's tried to love them up. I mean, there were times when you see some of these turnovers, and it's like you can just see it. It's about to happen, and he just is, and something good has just happened too. And then he's just like, and then we just give it all back. I mean, you can just see him like melt and go, what are we doing? But that's just what you're going to have to deal with a little bit is, Pop Isaacs and Jaylon Tyson were probably 2 specifically. Well, and Bacho had 5 turnovers. Pop Isaacs had 3. Jaylon Tyson had 3. So there's 11 of your 19 turnovers just between those 3 guys right there. And I watched them a couple of times last night, and you feel, it's like, because you can't stop it. You want to call timeout before he's about to throw this pass through 3 people, and then it just doesn't work like that.
I wish.
Yeah, it doesn't work like that. So
do the Zach Morris timeout, pause everything.
Yes, and then everything gets fixed, and then Mr. Belding gets punched right in the face. Yeah. So anyway,
Man, you mentioned Bacho, and there's some of those moments where you're thinking, well, here's one of the dividing lines between being a good player and maybe an all-conference kind of player. Hands. There's some transition moments, I think, cutting to the basket here or there. Some teammates finding him. He's still bobbling them 50-50, I don't know, 75-25, more than you'd like. And I don't know how you correct that or, continue to improve that process. I guess it just takes time. But did you notice some of those plays? I'm sure you did, Chris. I mean, there's just moments where you think, if he's finishing that one, flushing that here or there, that's really going to make him a pretty good player in the Big 12 conference, but just not quite there consistently yet.
Yeah, he's it's just hard for me to fault anything that this kid is involved with, even if it's true. Bad, just because he's emptying his bucket. He's playing hard on both ends of the floor. He's not being selfish at all. He's playing extremely hard on the defensive end. Yeah, I mean, and so you're going to live with some of that, not being able to catch it because, I mean, on some of those alley-oops, man, he's able to finish those, or he's, the putback dunks and things like that. But it's, when you see him, he plays 35 minutes last night, Casey, 35 minutes. And, I mean, and you know how many personal fouls he has? Just 1. And so
amazing.
At this point, you cannot ask any more from this kid. So if he fumbles one away or if he's going to turn it over a bit, I mean, that's just going to be, something you have to live with because, if he can give you 30 to 35 minutes and put up, 15 and 13 like he did versus Georgetown, I mean, he's kind of an all Big 12 type of guy.
That's true.
And so the key is managing his minutes, living with some of the mistakes that he's going to, and just trying to keep him out of foul trouble. But I'm a huge fan of that kid. I mean, But I'll tell you, the one issue that you started to see with this team, and we kind of knew that it would be, is as good as Bacho is, whenever Georgetown is going through that scoring run and you're trying to stop it, you don't really have the one guy you can just throw it to and say, help me, please fix it. Because that's not who Bacho is. It's not who O'Banner is. Harmon can kind of do it. I don't know if JT or Pop are really ready to graduate to that, because we're talking Bryson Williams, we're talking Jarrett Culver, we're talking, you've had Jamias Ramsey, you've had Mac McClung, you've had some names here that have rolled through here in the last several years where, you're going to fix it for me. Matt Mooney, and Keenan Evans, and I just don't know if you have that yet.
December 1st, Isaacs and Tyson, maybe not. A couple months from now, maybe yes. Yeah. Right now, Harmon is the closest to it. He's the guy that I guess, if I had to say create something, is going to be the most capable with the ball in his hands. I really don't even know what the other answer would be, but I still have some hope. I think that, maybe not too far down the road as we get further into the year, guys like Tyson and Isaacs. Isaacs from a confidence standpoint, he's ready to take that shot.
Yeah, and I think the key there is yet, because you can start to see who's going to be the alpha, who's going to emerge, because there's going to come a time when you're in Ames, Iowa on a Tuesday night, or you're in Waco, Texas on a Saturday morning, and it's going to be going nuts, and they're going to have a 10-0 run, and somebody's going to have to say, give me the ball. I will figure it out. I got this. And, a little passive last night, a little bit, is nobody really wants to or can do it. But, yeah, you're right. Maybe it is on the horizon, and maybe the key word there is yet.
And I'm thinking about what you said about Bacho. Can't be mad at him. And like he's in Clerks or with Jay and Silent Bob just saying, I'm not even supposed to be here today. And yet he's going double-double. Think about the way you might feel about this cat as a basketball player and what may be reliable within his game from day to day now compared to just at the beginning of the season. I said Bacho fever didn't die down any after an opening night double-double. Well, hey, we're turning the calendar to December, and it's still not dying down. The dude is asserting himself as an impact player for Tech. And I think we're seeing, Chris, some of what you hope to see as far as what he would do with this time and these extra minutes and all this extra opportunity he was going to be getting. I think he's becoming a better basketball player, and it's going to pay off for him as you get on into the season and hopefully for years to come. So credit to him for another pretty good night, and credit to the Red Raiders for a win over Georgetown. I want to get to the aforementioned Jaylon Tyson and his night as we really saw him pulling the trigger and stroking it, finding his range from deep, and really becoming an impact player offensively for Texas Tech against the Hoyas. We'll get to that coming up next on Locked On Texas Tech. But first, today's episode brought to you by BetOnline, your HQ online for live betting, stats, odds, scores, and more angles on the action than ever before. So get there today on your computer or mobile device. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite events on game day. Head there now and see what the trends are looking like this week, as we're not quite done with college football. Of course, the NFL rolling on, but now we're really getting into a basketball frame of mind, and they got you covered, ready to roll at BetOnline. Again, go there today on your computer or mobile device at BetOnline, where the game starts. Great to be back with you on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. New episodes each weekday, and make on Locked On Sports Today your second listen right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. That's Locked On Sports Today, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts. Going to get to the latest on the Texas Tech football front when it comes to bowl rumblings. What is in the wind as far as potential opportunities? Anything recently Chris has gathered we will get to coming up ahead as we're trying to make plans for game number 13 for Joey McGuire and the good guys. Coach McGuire was in the building as Texas Tech took down Georgetown from United Supermarkets Arena. Chris and I talking hoops, and Jaylon Tyson, I guess, heard the message, Chris, probably not from his head coach, but most likely yesterday's episode or 2 days ago episode of Locked On Texas Tech, right? Because we set it up. Hey, pull the trigger. We'd love to see you getting more buckets. And that was received because, man, from beyond the arc or otherwise, he was looking like the kind of scorer that I think certainly he has the potential to someday consistently be.
Yeah, well, and it's effortless when he really gets going, and the thing that about his game versus Georgetown, it's extremely efficient. I mean, he's 7 of 10 from the field. He's 4 of 5 from behind the arc. And so much of it is just kind of in the flow. And yet, if he misses some of this, you're thinking, we could have gotten that shot any time. Or, man, that is like the first potential open look within a possession. But with him, this is just kind of who he is, man. And he's a scorer. He has said it. I think it was a mindset with him, and that I'm just going to let it fly. And, Coach Adams told me after the game last night, he's like, I would much rather JT shoot it than put it on the floor and dribble it. And there's a couple times in that game, we just talked about that earlier in the show about, he kind of, with the turnovers, dribbling too much and he gets himself in trouble. And then it's like he gets it stolen or picks it up and makes a poor decision with it. But I think that if he just is aggressive and is looking to hunt his shot, I mean, he's talented. And I think, though, this has to be part of the recipe for a successful basketball season for the Red Raiders this year. He's got to provide that for you. That's just who he is and what you need from him.
Yeah, no doubt, man. He makes it look smooth. I mean, effortless, whatever words you want to use to describe what he's got going on. I think it's pretty easy to see just some of the intangibles as far as his ability to find some space. And like we were talking about just a little bit ago, really feeling like maybe at some point this season, you're going to view him in that kind of category of being a guy that can go get you a bucket whenever you need one as a team. And we've also mentioned the name, of course, Pop Isaac's already here today, Chris. I'm really enjoying so far seeing the ascension, and that I call it that because that's what I see. I think he's just continued game to game, not without mistakes, but game to game, assert himself a little bit more and progressively a little bit more production there to go with that assertiveness. Because, man, he was the guy that early on looked fearless. He was not afraid of the stage, the lights, the crowd, the opponent, whatever it might be. And we got a long way to go as far as the stage and those opponents are concerned. But I've enjoyed watching his progress through a short period of time so far.
Yeah, 10 points, and he's 2 of 5 from 3. Some of those, and this is where I think that's why I would really love to speed the process up of figuring out who's going to be the one that can handle things in a scoring drought or at the end of a shot clock. But there's a couple times because Pop he's starting to be more aggressive and just kind of he's not so sped up and he's kind of avoiding some of the turnovers still. It's a minor issue, but you could just see he's starting to grow and feel better about himself as the days go by and these games go by. And he's a much different player now than he was back in early November when the season started. So now that you're a month into this thing, but some of his misses, not necessarily his fault, but he's just heaving them up at the end of a shot clock when you're about to, hear the buzzer go off. And that's kind of where they need to kind of figure some of those things out. But yeah, I'm a fan, man. I mean, I think that he's a baller, man. He's got some dog in him. I mean, he's not scared. He's coachable. Just have to do a better job of sorts of taking care of the basketball, because I mean, Pop Isaacs and Jaylon Tyson are going to be two guys that Mark Adams is going to want to hug and kick repeatedly within the game, because I mean that's who those two specifically, because the highs are going to be pretty high and the lows are just going to be like, oh, what am I need to go sell insurance instead of coach basketball. I'll tell you a funny story. That's what Corey Williams, one of the assistants for Mark, he had the scout in the game last night, and we had talked throughout the day about Georgetown, and I had to interview him and all those things. And at halftime, he said I just don't know if I can be a basketball coach anymore. I need to sell insurance. And then after he was joking, of course, but after one of those turnovers, when you're just going, oh my gosh, turned around during the game. He turned around and looked at me. He's like, see what I mean? I told you, but that's
Progressive can save you $15 in 15 minutes.
Hey, there you go. But that's just what you're going to have to deal with here. It's going to be maddening. I hope that it is rewarding in time. But that's just kind of where you're at right now, and your rotation shrink. Now, here's a couple things we haven't talked about, Calvin. Rebounding was an issue that I think you brought up, and they needed to rebound better. You handled your business there big time. I mean, out rebounded the Hoyas by 18. Didn't take care of the ball as well as you wanted to, but the rebounding part, and they've
got size, as you've already mentioned. Georgetown has size.
They have a ton of size. Absolutely. We didn't get to see Mutombo Jr. Or anything like that. I was kind of just wanting to see some of that, but and then I we've talked about some of these guys hitting threes, but you made 9 of them, and that is part of what this team's DNA has got to be if they're going to be successful in the Big 12 conference. You've got to average, in the 7 or 8 range, whereas last year you hovered around 5 or 6, which is kind of what you're averaging at this point prior to the game versus Georgetown.
I mean, shot it pretty well. Both teams shot it decently. Tech was 51% from the field, 42% from beyond the arc. Need more than 16 free throw attempts. Would really like to see that number much higher for the Red Raiders. Kind of been spoiled by some numbers over some recent seasons.
Oh, man.
For Tech's basketball team, they've been some eye-popping free throw numbers.
Yeah, and I was wrong. You only made 8. It was Georgetown that made 9 threes. But, yes, to your point, that's where the scoring droughts can get stopped, is who's willing to take somebody off the dribble and stick their feet in the paint and then just demand the foul and all that. I mean, Keenan Evans was the best that's ever come through this program at that. I mean, he was better than anybody I've ever seen. That includes Andre Emmett or Sasser or Culver or anybody you want to throw out. He could manufacture offense by simply playing the pick and roll and just getting into the lane and then getting fouled and then away you go. I just don't know if you necessarily are there yet with anybody, but Davion Harmon can break people down off the dribble. He's just not the biggest guy, and he doesn't have that finishing move. Because he's going against some 6'11" dudes in there now that are willing to put that little floater attempt in the 10th row if you shoot it wrong.
He got one sent through the tunnel, I think, tonight.
He did. Yep.
But he was going to the rim, so I can't be mad at him about that. And by the way, of the 19 turnovers you had, Harmon won. He continues to protect the basketball, and he's got it in his hands, which still leads me to kind of think, all right, it's not the biggest crisis. If you bring in a guy like that, and he's part of this big turnover machine, that's a crisis. And you already mentioned it, 11 between Bacho, Tyson, and Isaacs. You can't survive doing that. So I'm not trying to act like, hey, it's okay because these are younger guys or these are freshmen. But you might allow a little bit more room for grace early on in the season for guys like that as opposed to Harmon. And by you, I mean me, because I doubt Mark Adams is behind closed doors. I don't know how much grace is going to be there to offer. But they're certainly trying to strike that balance, as you mentioned, coaching them hard and loving them up at the same time. Isaacs, I want to be fair, 4-3, positive assist to turnover ratio. Baby steps, Dr. Leo Marvin. So we're heading in the right direction. All right, we'll wrap up our hoops conversation for now. Plenty of time to get set for the next one. And Texas Tech's run with no margin for error will continue as you run through the rest of this non-conference schedule before you get to Big 12 play. But first, before we wrap up this episode, we'll get to football. Texas Tech awaiting information as to where they're going to be playing their 13th game this season, bowl eligible after a 7-5 win. Want to get into some of the latest tea leaves with Chris Level. That's coming up next on Locked On Texas Tech. But first, today's episode brought to you by Jay's Salsa Company. JaySalsaCompany.com is where you can get it sent to your door anywhere in the U.S. or over 90 stores in Texas and New Mexico. Most United Supermarkets, Albertsons Supermarkets, HEB here in Lubbock. If you happen to be in the 806, up your salsa game this holiday season. And my guy Chris Level revealed himself as a tamale Christmas Eve kind of family. You got to, and I got to tell you went up in my book quite a bit, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, bring on the tamales on Christmas Eve, man. That's how we roll. Yeah, and if you can't figure out which flavor to purchase on the salsa, whether you're buying it in person or online or whatever, the hot, the mild, whatever, buy both, try them both, mix them together, do your thing. And and if the J Salsa people give you a hat, okay, like a cap to give to your partner, like it's my responsibility to get that hat to my partner. I have failed miserably here, but I will tell you, the J Salsa people, if you order it, they're going to ship it to you. They're going to follow through with what you've asked them to do. Unlike this guy who didn't get the J Salsa hat to my partner, Coach Cowan here. Yeah, man, the people. I think we're at I don't know, in the upper 20s or 30s as far as how many different states have been hit based on orders from all parts and everything. So here in the lovely U.S., so people have been trying it from all over the country and keep giving it a shot, man. And it's chips and salsa like weather these days, anyway. So yeah, just I was about to say, just open up a jar and get a spoon out and just start getting after it right there. You don't need a chip.
Yeah, and I'm not so sure. I'm starting to reconcile this states delivered to list with my own list of states that should be kicked out of the union. And so if some of these are not even appearing, then we may have already covered what I expect to be the United States of America 25 years from now. So I don't know. Let's not get bogged down in the details. Get it while you can, because maybe at some point they are going to draw that line between Vermont and the rest of us. And I don't know. At that point, can J Salsa get to you beyond an international boundary? Who knows? So get it today, because they still can get it to you right now. Ship it anywhere in the U.S., including you, Vermont, at jsalsacompany.com. The hot, the mild, or get it on your grocery store shelf in that beautiful red and black jar. As I mentioned, in Texas or New Mexico, over 90 stores, most United Supermarkets, Market Streets, Albertson Supermarkets are in Lubbock, Texas, America at HEB. Get there now if you can, or get to them online at jsalsacompany.com. Thanks for joining us on Locked On Texas Tech, where it's your team every day on the Locked On Podcast Network. And thank you so much. I'm doing prayer hands, which means I'm extra grateful on YouTube for taking us to the number 2,000 subscribers on YouTube. We appreciate those who have saddled up so far. If you're still out there taking the test drive, go on and saddle on in, as now we make the push, Chris, to 2001. I'll be damned, and we're already there. All right, we're making the push to 2000 and okay, I don't want to turn this into a telethon, but go ahead and continue to get subscribed on YouTube so you never miss an episode. And thanks for hanging into the show this far with us, because this may be something you're interested in here. Bowl game tea leaves. I know, Chris, we're getting closer to some real clarification, but certainly out there things now to be gleaned, I suppose, here or there. So what are you gathering here lately?
Yeah, and I think you try to go through the different scenarios, and I know a lot of that's being played, with the Big 12 title game on kind of what that means. And obviously there's a domino effect because, we spent the better part of, I guess, what was it, Monday's show, talking about all the different possibilities, or maybe it was Tuesday's show, talking about the different possibilities of bowl scenarios and bowl games and projections and all these different things. And part of that equation is what happens between TCU and Kansas State. And does a certain kind of result or whatever, does it affect the pecking order and all these things? And I don't think it really will at all. I think what you have is you have 3 games and 3 teams. You happen to have beaten both teams, mind you, of the other 2. And that's where, these slots are going to get filled. I think that TCU and Kansas State are going to be in the sugar / playoff / at large pool. That's where that's going to happen. And then it goes Alamo, Cheez-It, and Texas in that order. Okay. And it's not, they kind of have a pecking order. They kind of don't. I think the SEC really does a good job with their league trying to put certain matchups together, and they can kind of go out of order. And if there's an attractive matchup or geography makes sense to sell tickets, or, hey man, this coach used to coach there, or
the Aggies want to avoid Tech.
They play that card too, or Texas. They don't Texas. Want the and I think they kind of actually helped put Mississippi State and Tech together, or were okay with it and approved it and all that stuff. And I think that there's a certain level of that going on in the Big 12. So I say all this to tell you that I think you need to be prepared for the following. Okay. I think Texas is going to go to the Alamo. That is not new news. Here's where it could get interesting.
Mount up.
I think the folks in Orlando may take Oklahoma, which would be, Oklahoma would be being taken way out of order in that sense, based on how Oklahoma's 3-6 in the Big 12.
Right.
They are 6-6. But, Orlando may, in fact, take Oklahoma. And so that would put you in a prime position to play a bowl game in the state of Texas against an SEC opponent named Arkansas.
Mm.
So maybe that's what you're looking at, is a Tech Arkansas game in Houston on December the 28th, which – I think would be, and it could be, I've seen projected it would be Florida.
San Antonio. Wait, you said Houston. You meant San Antonio, right?
No, I'm saying Houston.
Texas Bowl.
Texas, yeah, the Texas Bowl. Yeah, University of Texas is going to go to San Antonio. They're going to go to
I'm sorry.
Bowl.
I thought you said Alamo Bowl first off. My bad.
No.
Texas, Houston,
yeah, so because
Arkansas.
that's the order. Alamo, then Cheez-It, and then Texas Bowl. So it's San Antonio, Orlando, and then Houston. But I just think that San Antonio folks, they're going to take Texas. They're going to have the Longhorns 3 out of the last 4 years against maybe Utah or USC. Or
did they just fire a coach for going to the Alamo Bowl too much?
Yeah, technically. This is true. But I just think I think the folks in Orlando may just take the name and hey man, we don't ever really get a crack at Oklahoma. We're gonna, they're not great, but we're gonna take them and maybe put them against Florida State. I don't know.
What bowl is Orlando?
It's Cheez-It.
Okay,
yeah, the Cheez-It Bowl. Yeah,
that's fine. Go fart around with Cheez-Its.
Yeah, and the more, I just think that in some years it's kind of blah, but in this particular year, I think your fan base is excited. I think your fan base is pretty pumped about the bowl game, and I think you drop them in either San Antonio or Houston against a name opponent, from the SEC or the Pac-12, whatever it is. I think you're going to have fans, buy the allotment and then some as far as ticket sales, because again, we talked about this. Joey saw firsthand exactly what it did to his program's offseason last year, and Arkansas, if it is the Hogs, they've lost 3 out of their last 4 games. They did beat Ole Miss. I think near the tail end of their season, they've got a win over South Carolina, which that win looks better and better as they were one of the few teams that beat Cincinnati. They went to BYU and won. They kind of played a Big 12 schedule in some ways, because they played Cincinnati and BYU, which are 2 new Big 12 teams. But and they have a win at Auburn. I think that was right around the sweet spot of when Brian Harsin was fired. So anyway, that's kind of, we'll see what happens, but maybe it kind of funnels that way. I don't know. We'll see.
Would certainly be fine with that matchup, and I do agree that you're going to get a good showing from Tech fans in either of those places here in the great state. I'm sure it would be a better than average showing if you were going to Orlando or something like that, but it wouldn't be the same. As if you were in
not
Houston
even close.
or San Antonio.
Because Tech played Houston in that same stadium a year ago to open up the season, And we remember how important that game was for, at the time, Matt Wells' tenure and all that. And I mean, it felt like a bowl game. I mean, it wasn't sold out, but it was juiced in there, man. I mean, crowd was split and it was juiced. And, you've played Ole Miss in that stadium. You've played Houston in that stadium. You've played LSU in that stadium. So
Minnesota.
Minnesota a couple times. Yeah, that's right. So maybe you played Navy, I think, a long, long time ago too.
Oh,
yeah. I remember.
Ringer.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We got some memories in that stadium.
Yes, we do. So I just think that would be a game that I think would be really well attended. And it's funny to think about, because you've beaten Oklahoma and Texas for the first time in the same year. I guarantee you, you've never beaten Oklahoma, Texas, and Arkansas in the same year, because you kind of go back to some Southwest Conference type scenarios to where Oklahoma wasn't in that league. But I wonder how many times, if you ever beat Texas and Arkansas in the same season ever. But, at any point, beating an Arkansas program, if that's who you get, I mean, you don't thumb your nose at it at all if that's who it ends up being. But, man, I'd take the Gators too, man. If you want to send me some SEC, chumps, bring them on down. And their
Florida
quarterback,
don't want that.
Yeah,
Florida.
Well, their quarterback just got arrested too, so not good.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Good grief, that's a topic for another show. I know what you're talking about now. But Florida don't want that postseason smoke with Texas Tech in any sport. We've just been smacking them around.
Oh yeah,
basketball, of course, baseball, fit, whatever it might be.
Yeah, this is true.
I'd love that matchup here in the great state with the Razorbacks. I think your fans would certainly be on top of that 100%. And to me, as a college football fan, Alamo, Cheez-It, Texas Bowl, tomato, and one tomato out of the state. I mean, I have no clue what ranking those would be in, or like prestige levels. And maybe the swag bags are better at one or the other, or your hotel, or I don't know. But there's no difference whatsoever between any of those to me personally, outside of one obviously not being in Texas. So I'd love either one of those stops, obviously. But Houston against the Razorbacks, and really that opponent, Chris, to me, I think is what I was hoping more so would be satisfying if you had a nice game and maybe a nice win that you could get. Because we talked about it earlier in the week, man, going and facing a group of 5 opponent or something like that. It's just not going to pack the same juice. And we've been there, done that. Sometimes you got to do it. But I'd love to have something like that from a Power 5 conference that would give you the ability to possibly catapult into the offseason once again. And it would go double this time around because, this year you didn't have to fire your coach. So it'd be even better. It'd be even better than the catapult you got last time around, beating Mike Leach against Mississippi State, pardon me. So there you go. You heard it from Chris Level. We'll see if that comes to fruition, but that sounds like, well, obviously one of the options you gave us earlier in the week, and sounds like something that Tech fans would certainly be interested in.
I mean, think about that. If you just close your eyes and like visualize a scenario to where you finish the season 8-5, sorry, and you finish with back-to-back wins over Oklahoma and Arkansas. I don't care what year it is. I don't care if it's the 60s, the 70s, the early 2000s. In any year, that's a thumbs up right there, man. So
some years you're winning the national championship.
Yeah,
you finish with that.
Yeah, no doubt.
No, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, and again, if you're one of the kids on the team, maybe you wanted to go ride, Disney rides and stuff like that. I don't know what, going to Orlando and all that stuff, but from a football standpoint and a fan standpoint, yeah, man. And that's what these bowl execs and conference officials, it's sometimes it's not possible, but if you can kind of work it to where you get these intriguing matchups that are going to be enticing to the TV networks and are going to sell tickets for the fans, keep a team fairly close to home, whatever it may be, you try to, pull the puppet strings right there and make some of that happen. And I think that is a case where, something like that, because, I mean, you telling me that you wouldn't be at some level interested in an OU Florida State game if you just take out the records?
Sure.
Because that was a national championship game, 10, 12, 14 years ago.
It draw a great rating.
Absolutely.
People will tune in that have no clue what those records even are.
Correct.
They'll just stop because they see it on and they're like, oh, I know that brand.
Yep, and Florida State fans would probably be more excited about buying tickets to watch their team compete against the Sooners than the Red Raiders. That's just the harsh reality of it. But whereas if you tell a Tech fan, hey man, you get to play Arkansas versus a Vanderbilt, guess what? You're gonna,
or Florida State for that matter. I'd rather play Arkansas.
and probably in some cases that's true. So anyway, we'll see what happens. I don't think the Big 12 title game has any effect on any of this. I don't want to sit here and tell you I'm just totally ruling out, Orlando or even San Antonio, as bowl execs can change their minds and things like that. But at this point, I just don't think you're going to drop any lower in whatever pecking order we're talking about here than the Texas Bowl in Houston. And an in-state bowl, man, I mean, I'm all about it, man. Sign me up. It'd be juiced, and I'm here for it.
How do you become a bowl exec? Like you work a couple months, you get on a cruise, go to a seminar in the summer.
Like the Texas Bowl, I think they actually are employees of the Houston Texans. I think I can't remember. Our man, Drew Doherty is involved with it at some level.
I'll see.
Yeah, and I see Drew there sometimes, but I'm not. That's a great question. I really don't know because it's like the mafia, man. Too.
Yeah,
they're it's a bit tricky, but it's a money making deal. So hence the reason
you just don't want to be Joe Pesci walking in the room first. Welcome to the Alamo Bowl. Psych, papa. Send mothers to the flower. Leave the gun, take the cannoli, and all that good stuff.
All right. Well, yeah, I've talked long enough, but I just wanted to kind of just verbalize some of that and just kind of get people thinking about some other possibilities there, because I'm not sure if anybody's thought about it going down like that, but that may be in fact what we see.
That could be a lot of fun, and looking forward to some official clarification whenever the bowl executives do descend from upon high and extend their invitations. So not too far from now, and of course, we'll have thoughts on whatever matchup is revealed on the other side of the weekend. Got another one to go with you here this week, so join us tomorrow for Locked On Texas Tech once again on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. It's a new episode each weekday. Appreciate you for making us your first listen, and make Locked On Sports Today your second listen right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's the biggest stories of the day, instant reactions, and the take of the day, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or anywhere you get podcasts. That is Locked On Sports Today. Chris, we'll catch you on the other side, man. Thanks for the insight and the time as always.
Keep hope alive, my man. Yes, do it. I demand it. Let's do it. Let's go.
I'm your man. It's a glass half full always.
Yes.
I'm a little less than half, but I got a kitchen just down the hallway, baby. Let's get the mini bar. We're celebrating a win over Georgetown. It may be 7:30 for some of you. Just assume that we're doing it whenever you're listening to this at the appropriate hour. All right, we're catching you on the other side. For Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Thanks for joining us again on Locked On Texas Tech.